I'm here in the backyard of the spacious compound known as the Cui Mansion. I would take that laptop and turn it around for you to see the miles and miles of land and buildings. This is called the Cui Riot instead of Cui Marriott. I should ditch
Take
that.
number two.
Take two. Yeah, we're done. That's
Just
not it. The Cui Marriott, the Cui compound.
Dude,
but the compound makes it sound like a cult, so we really don't want it to be
the
like
cult
that.
vibes are strong.
Yeah,
there's a lot going for us.
And yes, I'm a spiritual man, and I get moved to tears quite often. But this fire is making me cry more. No, Jesus makes me cry more than that for sure. But anyway, yes, backyard, great setting here, right? If you're only listening to this, you're missing out on a great eye candy right here with me and Josiah.
It's gonna be a lot of action on that video.
Yeah,
video podcast.
Yeah, hopefully this is all setting up. No, this was the brainchild of one Josiah Cui. Anyway, man, my friend, known him for many
welcome
years.
Welcome to the backyard.
Thank you. I'm in the backyard, the backyardigans. That's what this is going to be themed, probably. But Josiah, when we were putting all this together, called different guys and called Josiah, and I said, hey, would you like to be a part of this? We will talk once a week. We'll get the heat index. We'll pray.
Yeah.
Your first thoughts so far as we're a few months into this whole thing?
Regret, straight up. I'm just kidding.
Well, we learn in life, even in the negative things,
felt,
right?
Never too early into a podcast for a little comedic relief. You know what I'm saying?
And listen, early and often. That's how we go about it. That's right.
No, it's been good. It was interesting timing when you called, because for me, our story's kind of been different than we anticipated the last essentially 2 years. So a lot of changes, a lot of kind of unexpected turns in the road in terms of what God's really had us doing or not doing. And so around the time that you called, it was interesting timing because we've kind of been keeping a pretty low profile, I guess you could say, in terms of church things, because of basically some of our story and the backdrop of our passage we can get into later if we want to. And so it was interesting timing because I had been thinking about essentially the fact that there's not a lot of guys that I'm really talking one consistently with or very deeply with, especially about church things. Yeah. And so it was good timing, just because I had been chatting with another friend, and essentially he had just kind of challenged me and encouraged me, hey, and you need to get some guys in your life where you're living, because he's a good friend, but he lives, a couple states away. Yeah. And it's been good. I mean, outside of the fact that I try and derail you every week when you call.
Well, we're not taking attendance, it's a good thing too, because if we're punching,
it's kind of like showing up to class, it's like, did you do your homework? Well, no.
Yeah.
But we're gonna have a real fun time.
Yeah.
Explaining how, no, I didn't.
No, I didn't do the homework. And if whatever we're talking about, I'm going to wing it and it's going to be obvious. No, actually, some of the best conversations we have are, we're just, the beauty of this whole thing is with you and the rest of the guys, where are you right now?
Sure.
I don't have to study for where I am at this moment. I'm just telling you what's going on, which is a good part about it. For sure. Which is kind of how we got here. Yeah. And as I go over our group with Aaron and Luke and Tommy and yourself and Tony. So as I record this one, Tony will be the only one that has not been on a cast with me yet.
Sanders.
And so the Sandman needs to get going here. And he has promised me that he will do one episode.
Come on now.
And we're going to discuss his whole journey to England and his small group love. As I lay out our group, it's starting to kind of form an identity of where your guys' hearts are. That's kind of where you head up and what we've been talking about. And so today we're talking about discipleship. What's it mean to you when we say that word, because that can turn into a buzzword?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, discipleship, I think, for me, is a loaded term for a couple of reasons. One, it's just a Christian buzzword anyways. Yeah. Like, it's so common. It's kind of that, it's so throwaway. It's Matthew 28, right? As you go make disciples of all, and I think part of the reason it's loaded as well as, so to get into a little bit of my background, having essentially worked for a church and been pretty involved on a leadership level for around 9 years. I'm a young guy, but that's kind of been a lot of like the entire chapter of really adulthood for me was the church and being very involved. And so it's a little bit loaded, not because of negative experiences, but because I think when you're coming from, let's say, like an institutional backdrop, you know, how kind of neutral or how pure are any of us coming to the idea of discipleship?
Yeah.
Like if it's this great commission, right? These kind of final words that Jesus is giving to his disciples, set them on this trajectory. I just think it's so easy to throw away and throw to the side, like discipleship. Of course, right? Whether it's wrapped up in the phrase, we want to get people saved, or whether on an institutional level, it becomes not necessarily about numbers. I don't know. I mean, from your experiences in church leadership and other friends and great men and women in the Lord who lead churches that I've gotten to know. I mean, no one's obsessed with numbers, not the people that I'm around.
Right.
But even so, institutionally, I think there's always that danger that discipleship is seen kind of as like a metric.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, so if you're asking me, what does it mean to me today? Kind of all those things considered. I think of it as like it's destination more than it is a metric. And it's hard because a lot of the, let's say, commands, kind of these ideas, these images of what does the Christian life look like? What does following Jesus look like in the New Testament? When those statements that we read are so pragmatic, we latch onto them and they become kind of, if you will, like the new 10 commandments. And so in a certain sense, we're looking at all these actionables in scripture, and I need to do this, I need to do less of that. And maybe the why behind discipleship or apprenticeship or following Jesus suddenly now is really, it's about like a type of, I'm living under, let's call it a new code, right? Like we don't want to say law because none of us want to live in a legalistic place,
right?
But in a certain sense, we're taking all these actionables, and it's like the Christian life is a recipe of this plus this plus this plus this equals saved, born again, Christian, follower of Jesus. And so for me, I think to wrap it kind of in one idea, then at least for me, is going, again, discipleship is the destination. And all of these commands and actionables, in my view now, they're a means to formation. They're not really, in that sense, like the new code of ethics. They're not the new law that we're trying to attain to. These are like a proxy by which we're conformed to the image of Christ. And life is that journey then of every single piece of life, every relationship, every action, behavior, and thought and decision are meant to be this proxy that either is going to conform me to the image of Christ or potentially deform me. Like because of like the, infection of sin. And the like destruction that it renders.
So we're trying to turn people, because we've taken, of course, the Great Commission. And when you think about the last things that Jesus said, it is finished, and then when that wasn't the last, but it was the last of that section of his life, and on down the line. So when that's the last thing he says before he leaves, it's pretty important. Kind of like your dad leaves the house. He's leaving on a work trip. Last thing he looks at the kids, behave.
Right.
Okay, I better listen to him. And so to me, that's the and so now I think we try to take it as a buzzword, and you said it beautifully. I love the way you talk, by the way, because you find ways to make it make sense, but it flows. There's not an end to it.
Right.
I've been saved what seems like my whole life. I still am being discipled. And so the question Hal Perkins asked everyone, the great writer, the Christian writer, who are you discipling and who's discipling you? If we're doing that together, do you think not only should you be bringing somebody along, but somebody should be bringing you along?
100%. Absolutely. And I think that even gets into, if we start thinking of like, okay, well, what are the mechanics of discipleship? If this is kind of that ultimate trajectory that Jesus has set his followers on, basically follow after me, right? Come and follow me, right? I mean, that's the initial command. That's the funny thing. You look at that beginning and the end. Okay, the end is this, go and make disciples. To me, that's an echo. Like you've got these bookmarked echoes. It begins with come and follow me, and essentially continues with come and follow me. If you use Paul's words, follow me as I follow Christ. So there's kind of this, in my mind, by the time you're hitting the Great Commission, you see this really beautiful, basically like expansion. Like it's almost like you've got this crystal, like refracting light all over the place, because what was first just follow me now becomes, in that sense, like three-dimensional, and it's got its targets set all over the place. And I think by proxy, like it's not just hierarchical top down,
Oh, no.
I have seen the risen Christ, therefore I disciple all others under me, but becomes this sense of give and take, and like kind of seeing the manifold wisdom of God expressed through the fact that Peter, who's like former in the Lord, like one of the original 12, seen the Lord, been with the Lord, he is eventually reprimanded by Paul, who's coming in later. So, if we're caught in kind of a top down, like, hey, discipleship happens at the highest level, right? So name your person, right? Whether that's like your pastor, whether that's your spiritual mentor, we get caught in that trap of top down. Meanwhile, right inside like the very first days and years following Jesus' ascension, you've got Paul who's coming in late. First off, he's kind of a traitor, for being honest, right? Kind of a and he's coming in late, but he has something to say to Peter. And something that needs adjustment, something that's off kilter. And I think that demonstrates a couple of things. Not only one, is it that discipleship is kind of like, well, it's more than a two-way road, but you could say it's like this whole intersection of highways, right? Like there's no clear, like, I disciple you, you disciple Bob disciples Joe, right? So it's not that, it's going all over the place. But also it exposes that, to use, icons, let's say like the apostles, as spiritually elite as we might consider them to be. I mean, Peter's getting an adjustment, admonition, like whatever you want to say, like a call to action, a call to repentance from Paul. And I think that's a really important point, because discipleship, again, it's not just lifelong, like you're saying, like it's necessary that it's lifelong. Like you left to yourself, eventually you're going to go off kilter. Me left to myself, I'm going to go off kilter. And those blind spots are only going to be corrected if there is discipleship, let's say, flowing out of, which is how we often think missionally, but also flowing into.
Because you can't draw from an empty well. You always hear. So if you're receiving, you're also giving. But I think you also, from two sides of it, have some experience to draw from to share. 10 years ago, there were things that I could sit down and talk to you about that would be way less than now. 10 years now into this, I can share a lot more because I've had more happen. But so my next question is, does that mean you have to be at a certain level of being a Christian? Because you just bring up a powerful point of Paul, a newbie. He was on the other side. How do we know he's not a mole? That would always be my thought, trying to blow us up from the end. And he has the gall to get up in Peter's grits, who's been there. Who are you? It's like the guy's been coming to church for 2 weeks and suddenly he's holier than you. How does that go into play? There is no hierarchy, right? When you say it. But from experience, how much does experience play into it? Or is it Bible knowledge, or that mixture of both?
Well, gosh, if there's an easy answer for that, we'd just like wrap up the podcast.
I'm great with questions that just kind of have to go on.
I don't know. Moving on.
Thank you. That dead air that we all need.
No.
But you know what I mean?
I think
it's
100%.
That's what stymied me in my early ministry was, man, these people here, they just haven't been alive longer than I've been preaching. They've been alive longer than I've been alive. And so they've got way more. Now I'm going to say something wrong. And the good thing was they loved me and brought me along. And if I didn't make sense, they never told me. But they also respected the fact that God had called me. So you learn from anybody, right?
Sure.
So
we hope so. Right?
You should.
I mean, and so I'm gonna go on a little whatever sideways journey here. So you either cut me off or we'll have Nick edit it out.
No, please go, because the rabbits are worth chasing.
Okay.
So that's good.
So we have this interesting instance. I think Matthew 25, sheep and the goats. Right. So Jesus is talking about the end of the age. And this whole like parable, whole story is really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, these are the words of Jesus, and he's giving us some sort of picture. I'm inclined to think I won't, be kind of manifested either as a sheep or a goat, in the end comes, right? But he's giving us a picture. You, on the other hand, no, I'm just kidding.
I'm an old goat right now, but if I can be a sheep, that's good.
So he gives us this picture, right? But it's telling us something important about how things shake out at the end of time.
Right.
He, meaning Jesus, somehow subdivides the people who are going to be with him, who he knows, and the people who he's going to basically push away and say, get away from me. I don't know you. All the things that he ends up basically sharing about, like the way to measure this, the way to evaluate it, has to do with their behavior, their action towards others, towards another. So he's going through the list, right? Those who were hungry, those who were, lacking clothes, those who were in prison. So he's like, in my mind, I'm hearing this and okay, I mean, it's already really interesting. But to me, what I think part of what this shows us is that Jesus is basically saying, orientation to those around you, like, first off, is really huge in terms of how, okay, we measure, like, did you actually know Jesus? Did you belong to him? Does he know you? But more than that, I would argue that if that's the way he's measuring it at the very end, it's because the very act of orienting ourselves and learning to behave and interact, love, serve, sacrifice for one another is almost like the be all end all. In other words, what really counts is not the number of verses you can rattle off. Not saying it isn't important, just saying, like, his test at the end of time isn't how much of the New Testament you have memorized, right? No. His test at the end of time is not sitting down with like the systematic theology quiz,
right,
and saying, okay, today we're talking about believers' baptism. Now,
right,
choice A, choice B. He's not doing that. Instead, he's looking at the course of your life, and not just the course, because again, it's not like law. I don't think Jesus is saying if you feed hungry people enough times, you earn me or salvation or eternity, however you want to look at that. I think what he's saying is you're kind of missing the whole point if you don't realize I am coming to you through these people, because that's the one thing that he ends up saying is he identifies and he says, basically what you did, the way you responded, interacted, reacted, like oriented yourself to the needs of another, that basically is equivalent to how you were with me.
Yeah.
Because if you've done it to the least of these, like you've done it to me. If you haven't done it to the least of these, you haven't done it to me. So let's rewind this, zoom it all back out. To your question that I really don't know how to answer about, discipleship and what it looks like in terms of like those who are like, let's say, mature in the Lord and have experience in history and life, those who are brand new, born again into the family of God, just trying to find their way. For me, I'm going, of course, you expect, those who are able to nurture from that place of experience and maturity are going to do that. And you could maybe say, okay, that's a lot of that's happening,
right,
predominantly. But I think we must not discount the reality that like young or old, Christian for 50 years, brand new Christian, like whatever the context is, it's always a mistake if we kind of forget that Jesus, if you will, can come to us through anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he came as a baby.
Yeah.
And everybody's writing him off. And then he comes as a carpenter from Nazareth. Like, what good comes, like
what good comes out of that?
Yeah.
Isn't that Joseph's kid?
Yeah,
what in the world?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's this inclination, like, because let's look a little bit at New Testament, right? Okay. Pharisees, right? This sect of Judaism. These guys, okay, we pick on them because of course we've got all of this stuff penned, particularly in the Gospels, just like Jesus, like scathing words and critique of them. But if I'm a Jew in that time period, I don't think I'm looking at the Pharisees with disrespect. In fact, I'm probably like watching myself so carefully because I do not want to get called out.
Yeah.
Right. Like next to those guys, oh my gosh, I'm like a piece of dirt. Right.
There's the food chain. Right?
Totally. Yeah. Totally. So I think we got to remember that because those individuals are the very ones who like kept on missing like the means by which God was coming to them and offering them life.
Yeah.
Right. Like Jesus, the baby born from Mary. That's a little sketch. Like what the heck? They weren't even married.
Yet.
Right.
Yeah.
From Nazareth, a carpenter, hanging out with fishermen, hanging out with so-and-so.
Yeah.
And we're always discounting like, well, wherever God wants to like, mature me, perfect me, sanctify me, Well, Pharisees are not looking at Jesus as
No.
like that's not where it's coming from. I think similarly, again, that's a like really long journey to say. I think there's always this danger. I mean, to be totally honest, like I feel in that sense like convicted or guilty about that because who of us has not like been in a small group, Bible study, like whatever, Sunday school, youth group, like you name your area. And there is a sense in which like whether we want to or not, there's a type of condescension, right? There's a type of like, I dismiss others and I dismiss the possibility that God might have something to say to me through them. And not just warm and fuzzy things to say, things that need adjustment, things that like, oh, if you could just become like a child.
Yeah.
How often is Jesus saying that?
Oh man.
Like,
yeah.
Everybody's looking for the like pie in the sky solution. How does God's kingdom come?
Wow.
And he keeps saying, well, if you could just realize like these little kids over here, they kind of got it. If you become like them, you'd actually get more of what I'm trying to bring. So again, that's just a long way to underscore with a few of those examples. I think it works a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a very practical answer. I think the reality is it's all to do with attitude because when we're set on our course, we're focused on the code, we're going to live up to this. I'm super Mr., spiritually mature Christian. We're going to miss the chance that God's coming to you through interactions with people you think like, oh, I just need to tolerate this and like, be the hands and feet of Jesus, I'll get through that. But then I got to get to my Bible study where I'm really going to dig into the meat. Versus like, every opportunity that I'm crossing paths with and I'm our image bearer of God is a chance, one, for him to come to me and show me something and teach me something. And I think that is, again, affirmed that at the very end of time, he will be saying, I did come to you.
Wow.
Like, and I mean, again, I could totally, we got to move on from that point.
No,
but like this passage for me has rocked my world the last couple of years. Cause I just think, what is it like to be finally face to face with Jesus in some capacity? And then the very real possibility that he would say, I came to you over and over and over again, but I don't actually really know you because you just brushed me to the side.
That's a ball bat to the head, man. Because and I love how you phrase things and the way you word it. And your perspective is always making me think. Because you're saying, here's the Pharisees. So Jesus is always coming to us through others. Always. And I'm sitting here telling you, in the last 3 years where I've worked and where I've been, even today, the fact that you say that just blows me away because I was at work an extra hour because a guy talked to me and it was all about his faith, all about how, a whole bunch of stuff, and almost apologizing that he doesn't go to church as much as he should and all this different stuff. And yet I got to see his heart. And, when you're getting near the end of the day, I can relate to hurry. We all do. Trying to pack up and trying to, I got this going on. I had to get home first. And I'm thinking about all that. And I just kept hearing Jesus say, hey, listen. And the more I listened and the more I was engaged, it was a great conversation. And one more time, it reminded me what you just said. He comes to us right down to Gabe, his beautiful little boy, Liza and Gabriel, both are beautiful kids. You got, and Steph, your beautiful wife. At least 3 of the 4 Cuis are beautiful. So there you go.
That's why we're out here.
That's why we're out here. No, you're beautiful too. But so I'm talking with
that just needs to be this drop quote tweeted about this podcast. You're beautiful too.
You're beautiful.
You're welcome.
That's a hashtag t-shirt that we'll have coming out here very soon, right? You're beautiful too. And we have to make sure the gun is there and the tongue click. We're setting up and getting everything ready back here. And Gabe, he says, what are you and my dad going to do? I said, well, we're going to set up here and record and talk about church kind of stuff in Jesus. He got real quiet, kind of looked around and said, does that sound boring? He goes, and this is why Jesus says we should be like kids. He didn't lie. Just because the ugly adult is here. He's like, kind of. He said, but now Jesus is not boring. And he went like that. So there I get, tell the truth, but always defend your faith. There you go. I learned that from a 6-year-old.
I love it.
So when you're saying, be aware of your surroundings, discipleship, because here's the Pharisees, the lovely, beautiful people that we know procreated because their descendants are still in our lives today, right? They're making the list of rules. And that's what yes, there are rules, and yes, there's the 10 Commandments, and yes, there's the Bible for our basic, but the lovely thing called grace comes in and makes things a whole different perspective. It doesn't abolish Christ-like and holiness living, but and this is all we're talking about, trying to teach folks once they become saved. But the list of rules, okay, discipleship is definitely a destination. It's something that we want to get to, but it's always going to be the journey that we're going to be on all our lives, right? And the checklist robs us of the joy and the flow. And it means you have to get to a certain level before you can disciple.
Totally.
I want to know your opinion. I have mine, and I'll tell you after you say yours. And if you don't agree with me, you're out of the group. But can you turn into a discipler the moment you become a Christian?
I would say yes.
And so would I. So thank you for that.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's good.
Relief.
Josiah Cui,
I'm not getting picked.
Hey, build my church members. No,
that's amazing.
But expound on that.
Okay. I mean, for me, I'm just looking at like the very first days of the church, right? I mean, if you want to say that's kind of like day of Pentecost, Peter's preaching, people are giving their lives to the Lord. I mean, obviously there's power and kind of a miraculous sense of how fast the gospel's spreading. But I think, like, not to diminish that, I just think the reality is you have all these people, largely Jews right now, but it's about to spill out to all the Gentiles. And the announcement, if you will, that Jesus is actually the Messiah, he's the coming king, that we're the ones who crucified him, but God raised him up. Like this announcement that Jesus is basically on his way back to remake all of creation, it's starting right now. Basically the acceptance of that message, which looks like, when I'm looking at New Testament, two main things: repentance and baptism. Basically repent and be baptized.
Right.
Won't go down the baptism track right now in terms of like, well, why is that and what does that mean for discipleship? But repentance, like step number one, right? Turn away from sin, turn towards Jesus. For me, like that's like, okay, that's like the command we get and then is on repeat the rest of our lives, right? And so in that sense, if somebody is newly, made alive in Christ, born again, in my mind, I'm like, well, you already have nailed, if there is a recipe, and we're kind of saying there isn't one, right? Like there's no code to crack, there's no checklist to attain to. But if you're looking for a recipe, I think what that is lifestyle of repentance. And to me, first off, if you're a new Christian, well, good. Like I can learn something from you because you are like fresh off of saying, I am going to turn from this, and I'm turning my whole life, every part of it, every piece that I can take, I'm turning it towards Jesus. And in some ways, probably we've all experienced this, the new believer might even be outpacing us, because guess what? When they're like kind of, it's all happening and you have that sense of like, oh my gosh, my life was lost in a wreck and like no hope. And now in place of that, like I've turned away from my brokenness and sin, and Jesus is giving me new, like those people are absolutely, if you will, setting the pace, right? Because again, if it is all about the checklist, and it's about knowledge, and it's about like basically being able to talk about things, versus what are you going to do with your life? I'm thinking like, actually, new believers are probably like really prime candidates to teach me something about discipleship. Again, there's give and take, right? Like no doubt about it. There are times, and I know God's used you for this, I have experiences in this. The reality is there are times where, if you will, those older in the Lord, however older that is, the kind of like, in that sense, more, mature and wise, are going to speak into someone's life and say, hey, to follow Jesus looks like this. And you have turned to Jesus, which is great, and we celebrate that, and you're coming along. Hey, be challenged by this. Realize Jesus wants to reform this area of your life too. And this is what it could start to look like. So we all have that, and that doesn't go away. But I just think, like, why not in so many ways?
And I think
we're the better for it.
Well, it is. Where you get excited at when you see somebody first saved, they're the ones, you just said it. That's where the excitement is. It's fresh, it's new. How many times do you see them? I'm bringing my neighbor to church. I'm bringing these folks here. And then we all realize, and it makes us remember. And so they can be, because there is no checklist, I think discipling is a billion and one things, and it is modeling by lifestyle as well as it is classwork or one-on-one mentoring and all of that. Hey, I got this. I noticed Fred's not. He gets up every Sunday and goes somewhere. Where is he going? He's going to church. Well, he's not as mean as he used to be, or he's got a different. What's going on? They see that, right?
Sure.
He's discipling even if he's not trying. And so I think that comes with us. It's a natural. It's in our DNA, right? And it also builds the church, and that's what we're about. Our thing is not only you're beautiful, but we love the church because we are the church. And so if we're building a family, so you as a father, your beautiful children, you're teaching them to be good citizens as well as good Christians, right? And you're well on track.
We're trying.
They're precious.
Trying, failing, succeeding.
No, you're fine.
It's all part of the process.
Every parent would say the same thing, right? So as a church, what's our the Great Commission, but mandate from God? Let's get them to the altar and then forget about them. Too often has become, and I'm not trying to be a hard guy on the church, but you know what I mean?
For sure.
So what's that in your brain? So someone first gets saved, and we're taking this discussion a lot of ways with it, I know, but since it is a lifestyle thing, how do we not fail them as a church? Even with us, this is not, we're not 501(c)(3). We are taking donations though, but
number at the bottom of your screen.
Please,
I promise this Mercedes has nothing to do with.
No, it doesn't. But the payment is due on the 1st of September. So you know what I mean. How do we even with us? How can we even use what God's assembled between us, bringing people along, discipling, loving them, and all that, and not fail them in your mind? I want to know what you think about that, though.
Yeah. How does this podcast script work? You just keep asking all the questions. I got to start asking you some.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, but at that point. We run out of Wi-Fi and the thing is over with.
Podcast over. See you next time.
Well, that's what my wife said. She said, this is not the Brian Farmer Show. So when these guys are on there, why don't you quit talking so much, Brian? So.
Well, one thing that we maybe haven't hit on. I mean, again, I think certainly stand by everything we've been talking about. A lot about formation, right? Like kind of the target isn't a checklist, right? The target is there's destination, if you will, to be conformed to the image of Christ. Like we can call it discipleship. The journey itself is discipleship. So all those things being true. The one thing that we haven't talked about is kind of discipleship as a community endeavor.
There you go.
And even arguably that part of being conformed to the image of Christ is being grafted into community and everything that means. So like whether we want to use the family metaphor, spiritual family, right? Or whether we just use the word community. I think, again, speaking from a number of years in an institution where, again, you try and keep the main things. You're trying to kind of keep the big picture tied to the fine details. But I think it's easy, right? In the course of trying to run an institution, trying to do Sunday morning, right? You name it, whatever that thing is that needs input and investment of its own sort. I think it's easy to kind of forget, like, really, we are here to be grafted into community. So like there's different images we're given in the New Testament, whether that's, hey, God has basically grafted you in, like, especially Gentiles, right? Like to this nation, right? Because he has a nation or he has a people, Israel. There's other things going on. We don't want to get lost on that right now. But like, point is, you've been brought into that. It's definitely something much more than just personal salvation. I am kind of personally saved so that my eternity is set, or whatever. It's you have a belonging to a community of people that like stems way back, for one thing, and again, its trajectory like is more than just, hey, you're part of the nation, pay your taxes.
Hello.
It's culture. Right? It's culture. Again, it is going to be formation. It's kind of family magnified, because in the case of Israel, let's say, it's a nation, but it's not nations the way we have today, because, I'm a citizen of the US. And if I choose to emigrate somewhere, right? Like, there might not be any, like, in that sense, like ethnic, biological tie whatsoever, but I can basically move from one nation to another, because it's kind of like, citizenship for all of its benefits, wherever I want those benefits to be.
Right.
Versus this idea of you've been basically brought into the people of God, the nation of Israel. Well, you've been brought into like this family kind of on steroids, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. The idea, whether we're looking back at Adam and Eve, or whether it's even the call of Abraham, is that God has always wanted like all the nations of the earth, if you will, like all the people of the earth to be his, the way, man and woman were meant to be in the garden. And so in a sense, we're being brought back into that first off through just salvation. Right. But then when it comes to discipleship, and what does that look like in local communities, local churches? I think again, it's really seeing, are we doing things that foster, build, advance community? Or do we have like let's say a well-oiled machine, like it's a neat and tidy institution, which is great, and people can come and kind of, hear the word taught, and they can come worship the Lord. And like in that sense, there is a level of engagement with the broader community. But again, I mean, that can look like a million things, right? Like some people, Sunday morning is going to feel like I am at home, right? Like, so for anyone who's ever like gone away to college or something, right? And for all the joy you had, leaving the house, right? Like I'm leaving home, I'm out on my own. What's that feeling when you're finally headed home on one of those, Thanksgiving, Christmas break? I can't wait to be home, right? Why? Because it's where you belong.
Right.
And all the things that come with that.
Yeah.
Okay, Sunday morning for some people might be that, and that's great if that's the case. But arguably, there are many people for whom Sunday morning is like, again, it might well be meaningful, intentional, purposeful, a form of obedience, let's say, like if there's that sense of, hey, I'm called to meet with other believers, but it definitely might not feel like coming home. Right. And I think this is the challenge for a couple of reasons. One, it can be a tough topic, not especially like when one is involved in trying to lead an institution well. Right. No, I mean, parenting. You want to see your failures? Do you want to see your shortcomings? No. Leading church. Do you want to think about, like we're falling short here and this is not how it ought to be there?
Yeah.
I've got lots of people who are together, even belong to Jesus, but are essentially alone, essentially isolated, and not, and I don't mean experiencing just in a consumer way, but I'm saying like engaged in community.
Yeah.
Right. Like with our families in a healthy family setting. Okay, you belong to family, in a sense, you experience the like benefit of belonging, let's say, but you also contribute, right? And you're not really measuring those two.
No.
And that's another thing. Because again, we get back to this whole, we so gravitate towards formulas and checklists. It's like, what does it need to look like in terms of how much you give and how much you receive? I'm like, you don't do that.
No, you can't
in family.
No,
right?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
It ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
There are times when you are predominantly giving, contributing, investing into your spouse, your kids, your sibling, like you name it, right?
Yeah.
There are other times where you are in a very real sense, like receiving.
Yeah.
There are dangers, let's say, of giving too much or receiving too much. Like but my point just being, I think it's trying to get to a place where discipleship, community go together. They feel organic. I personally believe that, basically like the I'm losing the word here, nuclear family is like, it's meant to be this image that helps remind us of like, this is being replicated throughout creation, right?
Yeah.
We can even draw on biblical support for that one, right? Like, be fruitful and multiply doesn't just mean, well, let's hope the Cui dynasty, like I want that many people. No, it's not about like just procreation.
No.
It's this sense of replicate what's going on, right? Like the family unit, the essential unit that is meant to image God, like let that come into interactions in that now with the body of Christ, because you've been grafted in.
Right.
Way harder said than done. I mean, I've given like, that's not practical at all.
But it can be.
But I think that's like, that's a starting point, right? Like there has to be some sort, I think we have to have some sort of vision for like, what ought this to look like? Because I would argue, I'll turn this over to you because it's time for some questions, Brian's direction.
Who said?
I'm the captain. I do.
We're in your backyard, right?
I was just kidding. church is going to look like something because like, okay, we can say we are the church. We can say, God is building the church. Both of those things are true. But I think, we also need to look through the lens of like, at the end of the day, like what the church is doing on the day in and day out is kind of like, it's the result of what I'm bringing to the table. And I'm going to try and make it look like something, right? Whether that's I'm trying to make it look like a lecture hall, like because knowledge is everything. Whether that's because I'm like, I'm just here to like, just be here, chill, like whatever it is. But we're going to bring something to that, right? In terms of what church is going to look like. So my question, turn it over your way. There's probably 1,000,001 ways that we think of what should church look like, especially what should community look like in the church. Obviously, we're not here to say this is the supreme way. No. Where are you at today, though, in terms of how you conceive of like how practically, how do we pursue authentic community through like kind of the apparatus of church, if you will? Is that a question? Make sense?
Yeah. Because how do you fit its operating system versus an app, right? So you got the operating system of the church. Each app is, to speak your language, the app is each compartment of that to make the system flow. So in the church, yes, we want to have a community, and I think it should be. This is something I've always thought of in my lifetime of not only that we want to sell it to, for lack of a better word, as fire gets in my eyes. So I'm getting emotional. Okay.
I'm just gonna crank up the smoke right now.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like,
listen,
please. That we aren't just for the newly saved, and we're not just for the people that have been saved for a little while, or the people who've been saved a long time. Family has great grandparents, and great, you know what I mean? And you said it. So in all those components, the church looks like that when you drill down, because everybody contributes something to make it what it is and to make it better. We need the perspective of all those people. And so in the concept of in the church as the apparatus to bring that community together, you do have to have a hierarchy in a sense, just to make sure nobody's playing with fire and plugging stuff into the outlets when they shouldn't. And, hey, make sure they understand the hedges to protect them from stuff. But at the same time, to not harness it in, because we're all different. One, you think about as Paul calls it, the foolishness of preaching. One sermon has to hit a lot of background and people on a given weekend, right?
Sure.
You got people all over the place in there. And so how can God do that? Well, he can, because he's God. And you hope that the person delivering the message or the lesson has spent their time thinking, how are we going to broaden this out to hit everybody? And so how do you have something for everybody? Here's where we always drill down. You got classes for all ages. Ding, hey, we got it for the kids and nursery and all that. And I believe in that. Right. I think you have to go into your section of your group so we can drill into those things. Men don't want to hear about what women go through. I'm sorry. That may sound terrible. Neither do women want to hear what men go through.
This is Brian Farmer and Friends podcast.
I'm speaking very broadly, but you know what I mean? That's in life. Then you got marriage, then you got the teens and all that. I think in the life of it, if we can say we've got something, we don't just make it up either. We try to hit, you just said it, in the daily life, trying to make your daily life better, because it's not just the worship, and I think we major on that pretty well. We've just always got to be careful to walk Monday through Saturday with you too, and have something, but we don't want to chain you to a building either. Sure. If you don't come and clean the church once a week, you don't love Jesus, by God. That's not it. It shouldn't be for guilt.
For sure.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
yeah, I think so. Okay, so next question then.
Yeah.
Institution with all of its like capacity, right, for structure and programs, like liturgy in the broad sense, right? Like this idea of, hey, we have something we're going through, moving through, that versus total organic, unstructured. The church is wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, right? So what have you found of benefit in both those worlds over the years, reflecting now, right? Kind of at a season of life where you're kind of out of an institution in the sense of, right, like not at the head, responsible for everything that's going on. What are the things that you go, hey, I just don't think you can get this.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how hard you try on a Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
But also, hey, you miss out on this. Like, what are the things of benefit on both sides? Because I think for me, we've kind of again lived in both of those extremes over the last few years of
Mm-hmm.
very involved in an institution like a
Right.
local church, and then down to like, hey, this week we just need to, whatever, sing a few songs in our living room and try and just,
I'm okay with
kind
that
of
too.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
worship the Lord on a really low scale and engage with family genuinely. So
Mm-hmm.
again, there's
Yeah.
like both of those possibilities, and there's people coming with all sorts of backgrounds
Yeah.
in church. What are the things of benefit for discipleship community in kind of in the church, in the institution, and just kind of, if you will, on the street organically,
Mm-hmm.
like
Because
not tied.
they both have great benefit
Mhm.
because they're so different at the other ends of the spectrum
Mhm.
that you think only one can work. It can't.
Mhm.
And that's what this has taught me in this past year. Is why I firmly believes why God led me to not even know what was going on at first, because let's start with this. This is an organic, on the street kind of a thing.
Yep.
We've got guys from all different backgrounds, different parts of the country.
Mhm.
And we're trying to connect and bring all this in to be a blessing
Arguably
to the
wouldn't
church.
be in the same group just by virtue of, let's say, like, not because any of us have like some big theological hostility towards one another. But the truth is, like, I've never been, quote unquote, a part of the Nazarene church, right? Like,
Right.
so in that sense, we wouldn't even maybe have a framework
No.
to be crossing paths,
No.
let's say,
Yeah.
if it was only relying on that.
Yeah.
So you have that going on.
Yeah.
Which is great.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
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 I
What
think
else?
because we stick to that sometimes by hook or by crook for whatever reason. And so that's kind of what we live in. And I'm fine with that too. I love my tradition that and I call it that, but so do you. We all love that, right?
Yeah.
But yes, had we all been going and doing our thing, there was no way we would be together.
Yeah.
And
cross-pollination.
Yeah, right. You can't do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, you can, but it's just not done all the time. That's the beauty of this, because now you're bringing in, we're not chained, we're not watching our phrases. I'm probably going to get excommunicated here.
Yeah, you're actually going to get kicked out of your.
I'm tiptoeing on a very small ledge here.
Nice.
But you're not having to worry about making sure that you make sure the metrics are correct and that you're checking in the right way and sounding good and all that. Because on the other hand, sometimes in the bigger part of the church, you're concerned more with time. Got to be done by, people check out after an hour. Or that's just been, it happens, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we should just stay there and do stuff forever, but the beauty of kind of freedom, but then the part of that you do miss is the gathering, because I do think Hebrews 10:25 is there for a reason. Now, it doesn't have to look the way we think it does either. Because not forsaking the assembling of yourselves never gives you an address, never says a time of the week. It just says make sure you do that. But then we also know that God does say in the Ten Commandments, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy.
Right.
There's a lot of things in this stew that we're cooking here. You know what I mean?
It's true.
So in the light of that, they all have their benefit, and I think that is the very reason why. And this is kind of what we're talking about here with small groups have a huge part in discipleship. That can be in a organic on the street setting as well as the church. I know great churches that I love really, really see the benefit in small groups. It used to be called cell groups. That kind of sounds like a jail ministry. So
yeah, we had to drop that.
We don't say cell anymore,
unless rebrand.
It's
light
small
groups.
now. Yeah, light, even better, right? I like that even better. But and because
change your world groups. By the time you finally launch one of these, it's gonna be
you have no. I don't even know what to call it.
Like
we're
annoying. What do they call those? Infomercial on TV where you're just like, and I'm telling you, you're gonna get this change your life upside down discipleship 1,000 times group.
Yes.
Wednesday. See you there.
Well, it has to be.
Bring
you
your
better
snack.
Bring a snack. Yeah. But you know what's funny? And this is Sam Barber. I'm reading this book about grace, and it's a lot to do with discipleship. It's what I got it because I knew we were going to be doing this discussion. John Wesley, and he's not just a Methodist and Nazarene background and all that. John Wesley would love the church, right? But he always said he thought that very thing you're talking about, the organic getting together without a structure, without making it look holding your head under the water until the last bubble comes up. He said, but you got to get down to business. So he thought nonsense and fluffery and all that kind of stuff. And we have to be careful. Now, look, I love to eat. it's a well-known fact. But sometimes it gets to where then that becomes maybe a lot of us don't have a whole lot to put together, And now you're saying, okay, it's the Cui's turn to bring something to eat. He said, "Hey, Steph, we blew a whole lot of money on this kitchen. We're eating ramen anyway, so we're going to share this ramen with everyone. We don't really. This is a bad time for us to be bringing. You know what I mean?
Totally.
You can't. Then you've got chains. I think the less change you put on
right.
the better it is.
Yeah.
And Wesley said, you get together, and as soon as you get in there, you pray, you talk about what you're dealing with. He said you shouldn't be there for longer than an hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Snacks,
so he's not. Yeah, he was probably skinny, but I think the beauty of the open thing is great because there's not an expectation, but there can also be it's brand new, but there's also a lot of mistakes and failures in that way too, which is fine because I've come to learn if you're not failing, you're not trying. Not every failure is a sin. In the institutional side, the blessing and the head start is that you've already got a structure, and so you can kind of plug into that. You've got a home base to kind of look at. And it is something you can rely on, but you gotta be careful not to get comfortable with that. Because now it's like, okay, well, we can just always meet there. It's kind of
autopilot.
That's why I love being back here with you.
Yeah.
This is relaxing and it puts you in a whole different mood. Great setting. You get invigorated, but you just don't want to be a slave to that.
Yeah. So maybe we could say, and I know we're going to be probably coming at time here. I know one of the things we were thinking about talking about here at the end was, what does it look like practically, right? For people at home, food for thought. So maybe by summary in what you're saying, interjecting some of my own thoughts here. When we're comparing, like if we're putting them on two opposite ends of the spectrum, institutional church, right? Sunday mornings and programs and the building and all the things. I belong to, so-and-so, Nazarene, Baptist, Methodist, like you name it, right?
Right.
So you've got that on the one end. On the other end, you've got this totally organic. We are the church in that sense, right? Kind of that, kind of a popular sense that people have. I think there's an invigorated, kind of communal sense for like, we can be the church anywhere. So that's on this other end. Maybe by summary, we could say one of the biggest benefits that I think people are seeing in the idea of, well, we are church, right? Like Christ in me, in us, right?
Yeah.
Is that it helps us get out of modes, let's say, we get into like stuck places where we can actually bring authenticity. Right. Because you start to, it's maybe less political, we could say. I don't mean that in the like government sense. I mean, like there's less that you're thinking through about, like here are kind of the unspoken do's and don'ts of institution. Instead, you're on the search for, again, what is God doing in this other person? What can that do in me? What can I give to them? Like you're treating it organic the way we treat family, right? It ebbs and it flows. So like there's a benefit to that authenticity, right?
Sure.
Let's say then the other big benefit though on the institutional side, and I think again we only talked about it a little, but I'm sure we both in particular have experienced it with our respective stories, is the actual pattern. Like I use the word liturgy often, not because I'm from a true liturgical background, but the idea of framework and order and structure and flow. Even the idea that Sunday morning itself symbolizes, right, this idea of Sabbath and gathering with other believers. And if you don't have almost like obligation, always sounds so negative, but one of the things we've realized, especially because we were a part of a small group for lots and lots of years, and I think it was only after we, again, kind of went through this journey over the last few years where we were moving on from where we had been for a long time, was realizing, oh my goodness, that Wednesday gathering, which again, maybe people wouldn't think is institutional, but it was, because it was, if you will, it was a part of the programming.
Yes.
But like, wow, being able to basically orient your life around every single week, I am going to come, and this is what it's going to look like. Not crazy rigid. I just mean there was structure, there was order, there was that sense of like duty or obligation, but in a positive way.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of really the benefit we see on the institutional side, right?
Absolutely.
So we come to this question then, what does discipleship, like what are the small things we could do personally, right? We can't always affect systemic change. It also can be really hard to find one another, right? For people on a journey going, I just want a safe community where I can be authentic, but I can also be challenged and grow in the Lord. Like, what do you think? What is the starting blocks, knowing there's extremes that exist on both sides. There's benefits on both sides.
Mhm.
What does it look like for a person on the way, on the journey?
Sure thing. One thing I wanted to think, because you made me think again when you
Mm.
said that, because my thing is how to make that relaxed yet still respectful atmosphere of the organic,
Yep.
putting that into the institutional side,
Mm-hmm.
and not so stiff, and not so I can't talk, and not so
Mm-hmm.
I'm an outcast, out of place. That beautiful part, that where we feel like we're coming home and we're
Yep.
together, and
Yep.
that structure of, you know, four of us sitting around a fire, or in your
Mhm.
living room when you have a small group, when you come, or
Mhm.
whatever. How can that still be a part of the institution when we gather in a
Right,
sanctuary?
right.
To me, that's where
Yeah, yeah, that's
that's
where
the secret
okay,
sauce.
yeah,
That's
totally.
good to put that together in there.
Mm,
And then now I think you got some.
yeah,
You know, I really do.
right.
As far as what it looks like on a daily basis, was that your question?
Yeah, I think like building blocks, practical things, like
Yeah,
personally.
I
Yeah.
think you have to really make a heart of change how you pray. It's what I've had to do in
Okay.
the last 3
Okay.
years, in the journey, the beautiful journey that I
Mm,
wouldn't, no matter the bumps in the road, I wouldn't change a thing.
yeah.
I would change my attitude and my actions, obviously, but I wouldn't change the
Yeah.
lessons God's taught me. Change, hey, God, give me a good day, to
Mm,
God, use me in this day.
mm-hmm.
Because I think the absence of hard time is not a good day. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that.
Yeah,
You can still have a good day working through tough stuff, right?
for sure.
So I had to change how I prayed.
Yeah.
That's why I just go with what I've done in my life and
Right.
say, okay, God, use me today.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, man. A
Mm,
person that will put themselves in the hands of God
mm-hmm.
willingly,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to turn into a discipler at some
Mm-hmm.
point,
Mm-hmm.
because now it's about, okay, I have my list of what it needs done. But if you're going to send 3 people to me today that really need me to listen,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay, because I
Yeah.
know you'll get that done.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, agenda aside. This
Yeah.
all sounds like stuff people have heard before. I just use words.
No.
I know, right? Next is comfort zone, of course.
Nice.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
for
I
sure.
think building blocks,
Mm,
when Jesus lovingly told her, "You're sinning, knock it off.
mm,
But I love you and I can give you a better life." What did she do? Her
mm.
first reaction was to run to town and tell everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's your lifestyle. It's you.
Mm,
If it starts with me,
mm-hmm.
when you started this fire, you didn't just look at it and say,
Yeah.
hey, I went to fire school and I know how to build a fire. You had to put the elements in there.
Yeah.
When you're healthy and the elements are right within you, you'll turn into that person.
Right.
That is
Yeah.
that. So building blocks for me as a person is that.
Yeah.
So I think. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, lots of answers, right? Lots
Yeah.
that we talked about tonight. I think to agree with what you're saying, I think you know, boundary lines, you know, we're
Yeah.
often so conscious. Um, and even the idea that institution versus organic like almost indicates like, well, we're really putting that boundary line in our minds, right?
Yeah.
Useful for thinking, useful
Yeah.
for like analyzing and like trying to parse things out. But at the end of the day, well, I'm the one who's actually keeping those lines clear versus allowing it to blur a little bit. And that maybe sounds a little bit odd to say, hey, let's blur the lines. But I think that's some of what you're saying. Like at the end of the day, again, I feel very aware, especially now, not employed vocationally, right, in an institution. How much can you affect change? That's really hard. But I think in some ways for the individual, it's going, well, the lines don't have to be like super drawn out if you don't want
No.
them to be. At the end of the day, you know, me opening myself up to discipleship is a question of not so much like, okay, where's that spot I go where, the AC is set right and I've got the snacks I want, like I can come and like bring
Yeah.
my true self. It's a question of like, will I open myself up? And there's danger in that. There's risk, there's reward, right?
Yeah.
But will I do that? Can I do that? Let's try and do it on a Sunday morning, even if I don't feel like that's the place where I really want to open up.
Yeah.
Right? For some people, that might be a frontier that's uncomfortable.
Sure.
For others, it's like, hey, the stranger you meet, like Jesus coming to you in stranger's clothes, like
Yeah.
you might want to stay really guarded, but like again, if you're orienting yourself in prayer to say, God, use me today, well, let's not be surprised if he kind of shows up in disguise. And that's an opportunity, okay, yeah, to like give something to that person. It's also a chance to receive. So, okay, let's blur the lines, right? Almost intentionally. Let's allow our minds to blur those lines. I think the second thing I would probably say, which maybe sounds a little bit trite, but I just think it's true. I think it's been evident even since, the day you called up, and more than anything else, you didn't say, hey, do you want to do a podcast? You said, hey, do you want to start talking once a week and just checking up? I think the reality is just not throwing in the towel on involving yourself in someone else's life, like another believer's life, and allowing them to involve themselves in yours. Like that's a discipline, right?
Yeah.
Whether you have the institution fostering it for you, hey, you signed up for a Bible study, hey, you signed up for small group, or whether it's, hey, this person's always been a friend, but like we need a little intentionality. Like the truth is, if you and I got together just to sit in the backyard, it'd be great.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't accidentally start talking once a week unless someone had said, in this case, you said, hey, what about like checking in? And I don't even think it's again like so much about here's our accountability structure as much as it's again, it's like the liturgy, the anticipation, the like there will be this structure, and we do that for, in a sense, one another and for ourselves. It's a means by which God can come and work.
Yes.
And discipleship can happen, growth in a two-way sort of relationship.
Absolutely. And I always look forward to it. And I got, it's not a chore at all. Yeah. And if something happens and we don't, you miss it, you make it up, you enjoyed the conversation. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not accountability. It's not a big, it is, but it's not, because there's not a list of, hey, have you not, blah, 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 spit in the sidewalk this week and done all that. It's just simply, hey, how you doing today? And then it evolves into prayer, and it's just right at the moment. So I think in what you said, don't need a title, and neither one of us are institutionally employed right now either, right? And we were. I don't feel any less of a Christian than I did before. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that because people are watching. I feel like
I know.
You know what I mean? Yeah, maybe that much, right?
Yeah, totally.
Understand what's hard.
Yes,
that's your identity. Now you realize my identity's in Christ.
Yeah,
absolutely. And if He wants me to use other gifts that I've got, that's fine. You find out it's eye-opening that it's every day, right?
Yeah,
and you're the same. And whatever His will for our lives is, we're up for it, But I think it's just being open, being ready to use it. Did we answer all the questions that you had?
All questions
on the phone today?
Discipleship.
Because you sent me that beautiful text that I want to refer to here, but you're like, make sure that we don't talk about you all the time. Well, guess what? I already did, but
that's maybe not quite what the text said, but
we're building a church. When the last thing you said we're building a church, and that's what we're doing right now.
Not church.
Yeah.
Like you said a church, I was like, wow, went somewhere fast.
This is why texting can get confusing sometimes, but we are building and the church is people.
Yeah.
And so if you're investing in people, you're investing in the church, right?
Amen.
Quickly, we got to wrap it up because we're going to run out of light outside here. I don't even know where we're at in time. What's encouraging you today?
What is encouraging today? The Gospels.
Cool.
Good. I think I feel enamored kind of by the life of Jesus. The more I study it, I'm just like, He was so confusing.
Yeah.
What a way to end a podcast.
No,
did I just say Jesus is confusing? Yes.
On the next episode of the Build My Church podcast. No.
Yeah. I just, to be honest, like, and it's a whole nother podcast, right? The curveballs, the left turns, the confusing things that happen in life.
Yeah.
For me, I was chatting with somebody the other day and, talking about like, hey, what good comes from bad things, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a little bit philosophical, right? And we were talking about some specific things, but the point is we got to talking about, I said, the thing that really kind of bothers me, but I can't really get away from when I'm like reading through the New Testament is like, on the one hand, like, of course, nobody wants bad, difficult, unpleasant things to happen. But on the other hand, when they do, like, is there really any other way that you come to experience, kind of parts of God that you just wouldn't experience any other way?
Absolutely.
Right? So you're out on the boat and the waves are crashing in. Like, at the end of the day, you can't really learn about that experience with Jesus at the bottom of the boat asleep unless you're in the boat with Jesus at the bottom asleep while the waves are crashing. Like you can't really learn that on the shore. Mm-hmm. And I think over and over, Jesus turning just everything on its head and just, kind of saying, you've heard it said this, but like I'm saying this over here, and
Oh man,
here's how to actually live. For me, that's encouraging. Like the Gospels just kind of won't let me go, and they honestly give me a ton of, like, I would say at this point in life, there's just the seasons we go through, gasoline in the tank. Because I personally, like, it's that mystery that actually makes me go, I think I will hang on and keep following him.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what's encouraging me these days, I think, is revisiting the Gospels and stories in the Gospels, and I think being able to identify with the not so pretty parts.
Yeah.
And
boy.
Like that feels a little bit more like, hey, maybe we're not so off track.
Exactly.
Disciples are messing things up.
Yeah.
Pharisees are getting called names. Like, know.
Yeah, we forgot to bring bread. He's gonna kill us, or whatever.
Everybody's freaking out on the boat,
Yeah. Once again, you have turned over a shovel of dirt again, because you said, how many times did he say, you have heard that it has been said, but let me reprogram it. Let me tell you something different. Here's what I'm bringing to the table. And that's encouraging. For sure. Yes, it is.
What about you?
It's encouraging me, some of the same stuff you're saying as well, but there is more of a hunger from people to be like Christ than I thought. And it's even from people who are still kind of confused about the church. And again, in the setting I've been in, the great job that I have for almost 3 years now, I have run across many different walks of life. And I've learned even more than ever to not judge a book by its cover, and not allow the things that are coming out of that book to really define where they're at and write them off. Don't write anybody off. You just said it. I'm encouraged by the fact that there's a lot more people seeking godliness than I thought. And I want to blow air on that and make that bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I can be the leaven in that loaf and help them find a way to rise, that's what I want to do.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Hey,
dude,
episode 5 has come to a wrap.
Thanks for having me.
Josiah Cui, stand-up guy. Appreciate you, man, being here. Look for more from him in the next little bit. We've got a lot of good plans Yes, we have a lot of good plans. We have many good plans for this podcast.
Many good plans.
You got ideas? Yeah, that's the way I talk. The Build My Church Pod at gmail.com. Send us your stuff. Tell us any ideas you need. But again, we try to function as a way to help the church. Let me stretch that out even more and say, if you need a Bible, you don't have one, give us your address. We'd love to send you one. If you need help finding Christ, we would love to help you do that as well. And if you're part of a church, you got something you want to put on here to promote, that's fine. We'll help you do that too. We love the church. Anything at all. We're just here to do anything that can help the church become even better than it can be. Okay. Thanks for joining us today.
See you next time.
Yes.